Well, hi, everybody. It's Heather. I'm so glad to be with you. I hope you have had a really good week. After the challenge, I took last week off and really kind of tried to relax and kind of restore a little bit, and then get ready to launch this new series that I'm talking about. If so, you've been on the socials, if you've seen it, it's Life Hacks, and who doesn't like a life hack? Quite frankly. So, anyway, before we jump into that, I just want to say thank you for your participation in the challenge. Had a lot of new participants in this challenge, and it is just my joy to share this good stuff. I don't. I mean, it's nice to have a business and be able to make money and all those things, right? In order to live, but I am mostly passionate about sharing information for the benefit of others. That's what I'm passionate about. So I don't like the whole salesy kind of thing, but I do like to share information that is helpful and beneficial. So I just want to stop and say thank you. And thank you for showing up. And thank you for participating. And thank you for listening on the podcast if that's where you listen, or if you watch live here, or if you don't watch the live or don't listen to the podcast, but you like my content that I post. Really, it doesn't matter to me. I just know that everybody's a different learner. Some people learn like watching videos. Some people learn by listening to podcasts. Some people learn by, visual, like a PDF or a document that they can go step by step. So I try to reach all those categories. And I am super excited for what's coming in January with my new course, Feel Good in 30 Days. And I'm excited about it. So you will see more and more about that. But for now, I want to talk about life hacks for relationships. Okay? So really, this is a series, and I've done life hacks before on feeling good in our body. I've done life hacks, but this is more specific about relationships. So I am a certified level 1 Imago relationship therapist. Now what this means is I had a lot of training in relationship therapy, how relationships work. Now, Imago typically focuses on more romantic. However, it has evolved over time to include family, to include friends, and even parent-child relationships, right? So that's where I'm coming from with that information, as well as my own personal experience in therapy, and as a life coach as well, that it is common to have issues or questions about relationships and the things that we run into in the midst of relationships, the challenges that start showing up. I can tell you that relationships tend to be a little bit more activating in romantic and family. And there's a reason why. And I'm going to talk about it. But that's why I'm talking today about family. Okay? So, first, let's just get a framework. I think it's always helpful to get a framework for where we're going, what we're doing. So the framework is this. When we think about relationships, I want you to think about comparing it to you are searching for a house to buy, to invest in. You have saved your dollars, you have money in your pocket, and you are ready to go out and buy a house. I want you to compare that desire to buy a house, the type of house you're looking for, to your relationships. So when you go out looking for a house, buy a house, you want a good looking house, right? With all the cool stuff, all the newest appliances, modern, or maybe you're cozy, or maybe you're retro, or maybe you want a 100-year-old house. It doesn't matter, but you're looking for the thing that appeals to you. And then you might sacrifice some of those to save money, right? To get a deal, as long as the house has good bones, right? You'd be okay with that. But what if it has a cracked foundation? My bet is you'd be out the door. Why? Because the risk would then be too high for the house to collapse, to fall, to falter. It wouldn't be safe. So when I want you to think about relationships, I want you to think about safe, sturdy, stable, supported, right? So in the same way, relationships, like a house, they begin in different ways, obviously, right? A house is built and it has a plan. However, we go into relationships in different ways. We show up there. Some are given to us, we're born into them, family. And some we choose, friends or romantic. But all of them demand, and I am intentionally using that word demand rather than require, because it is an asking that happens. It is a bid for a need, a request for a need. All relationships demand a solid foundation to build upon, to grow, to become, to evolve. Now, this foundation ideally will provide support, stability, and safety. 3 very, very important things that all humans need. And most importantly, to stand firm and withstand the storms of life, because y'all, the storms of life are going to just show up every time. They're going to keep showing up. They're going to keep showing up. So we got to learn how to cope. We got to learn another way. And that's why I do what I do. And I've been doing it for a few years now. Without the solid foundation, the relationship, like the house, is at risk of what? Faltering, collapsing, not being able to stand strong, right? Not being a safe place, a safe container for this people that are in relationship, generally one-on-one, right? So the foundation for relationships is connection. Connection is the most important need of every human being. Human beings are wired for connection. We are born into relationships. Relationships continue to be part of our lives, whether we want them or not. Or when we don't want them, we withdraw. But then there are other relationships that come up, right? So connection is this beautiful, solid, stable, safe foundation. Okay? Brene Brown on a podcast yesterday on Unlocking Us, she is doing a reading of the Gottman's new book, The Love Prescription. And I'll post the links in socials so you guys can have this in the podcast links if you're listening to the podcast. But and she was talking to her sisters, Barrett and Ashley, as they were breaking down kind of their debrief on reading the book. And it's a really insightful conversation. I love listening to their conversations because they're both, like Brene and I think Ashley, are social workers, and the other sister is a therapist. So it's just, they have so much knowledge and experience and wisdom and education. And yet they still struggle with this stuff, which I think is just so important, right? And one of the connecting points that really landed for me was Brene was talking about connection, and that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. So in recovery language, I'm a recovering codependent, so I speak in a lot of recovery language. And so when she said that, I was like, oh, that's right. Like, addiction is this numbing of connection. So the opposite of addiction is connection. And connection is inherently vulnerable. Humans are wired for connection. We're wired for it. But it can feel really, really vulnerable, particularly if we've never really practiced it. These are 3 phrases I'm going to say over the next 5 weeks of this series, right? Because I do the podcast every other week. So this week I'm doing family. In 2 weeks, I'll do friends. And in 2 weeks, I'll do romantic. So these 3 phrases are really important. I learned this from Imago. We are born in connection. We are wounded in connection. And we can be healed in connection. Really, really important. And my hope is it will make sense as we go through the next few weeks. Okay? In the meantime, we're going to focus on being born in connection. Family. Complicated? You bet. Especially our family of origin. So, as children, we're born pre-wired for connection. Yes, there are physical needs. Children have physical needs. But connection is the number one need. Learning how to connect with other humans is what developing children are all about. I want you to think about maybe grandchildren or children of your own, that that whole concept of having a baby. I have a new grandchild and she is touching and learning and putting everything in her mouth, cuddling, hugging, singing, playing, laughing, talking to her crying, her asking for her needs is the only way she can ask for her needs is to cry, right? So she's connecting, and when she asks, she receives information. She receives something she needs. Those are truly primal needs that every human being has. It just begins to get a little lost as we enter adulthood or as we grow up, because we learn behaviors that maybe some things aren't right or some things are wrong or that's not the way we do it. And so we kind of start like losing our sense of ourselves. But children are the purest, rawest, most open books ever, right? So connection can feel great. You know what it is when you feel connected to another human being. You feel that creativity, you feel that vibrancy, that warmth. If you're working on a project together and you guys are just on simpatico, or if it's a family member that you haven't seen in a long time and you just are so excited to see them, or an old friend that you haven't seen in 20 years and you have lunch, like I just did recently in Louisiana, an old friend I haven't seen, and we just were able to pick it right back up and just have that connection. It is great. And yet connection can feel really hard, especially when emotions begin to surface. See, connection means that when hard, difficult feelings happen, children are modeled that these feelings, both hard and good, are normal. And they're a part of being human. And children need to be walked through it, right? Need to be taught. And this is a skill. This is no different than taking our first steps or riding a bike or a tricycle. Those things require present, engaged support. And the place that we do that in as children is family, our family of origin. Our very first caretakers, parents, grandparents, guardians, and even siblings can function as caretakers in a lot of families. So family is your first lesson in relationships, how they work and how they don't. So children are like open books, experiencing life freely, openly, without filter, right? Kids will tell the truth every time, right? And this includes feelings. So hard feelings, we as adults know, is scary, right? It's disorienting. So children are scared and they want connection. They want to go to a parent and say, I'm scared, I'm feeling all this, and I need support. I need support. They're going to demand that stable, safe support. Remember the foundation, that safe container for their feelings. Now, sometimes, and this is the wounding part, right? Sometimes that demand for connection, crying, like I'm crying and I need you to be with me, and what I'm feeling just feels too hard for the caretakers, for the family members. Feels too hard. And so in that first moment, we have our very first wound in connection. We had a need and we didn't get what we needed. And that is where we are wounded in connection, right? Okay. So look, every parent arrives into parenthood with learned behaviors and coping with problems or struggles. And we all have our invisible baggage behind us, where we are all these experiences that have shaped us into who we are. And so we come into parenthood with this. It doesn't disappear when we walk out of our parents' door. So for some, it can feel really hard to talk about feelings, even good ones. You don't know what you don't know. I mean, heck, I didn't get really connected to my emotional self until I was 40. So, that's 10 years of learning and growing in emotional intelligence and applying what I've learned to the point where I want to share it, because it has helped me so much. And I see the importance of emotional health, particularly in relationships with this work that we're talking about. But the bottom line is you don't know what you don't know, right? There are many times that you can look back and go, I didn't know. I can look back at choices I made raising my children. I didn't know what I didn't know. But when you know, as Maya Angelou says, you know better, you do better, right? So family behaviors start showing up pretty quickly. Your family of origin. When hard situations happen, generally certain behaviors will start showing up. And this is general. Some examples are overreacting. Examples of overreacting or overfunctioning is being hypervigilant, wanting to fix the problem instead of just be with the person having the feelings, getting angry. I don't want to feel that. When you're feeling that, I'm feeling that, and I don't want to feel that. It feels yucky. Stop. I'm mad. You need to stop. Quit feeling that way. Stop crying. Those kind of things that maybe you have heard other people say to their children. I was one of them. I was one of them that my daughter really felt things profoundly and deeply, and it was very hard for me to be with her in that emotional pain because it was so painful for me. But I wasn't walked through it. I wasn't shown how to feel those feelings. So I overreacted. Then there's reacting or underfunctioning, where there's avoidance, really, withdrawal, leaving the room, ignoring it completely, ignoring the needs, ignoring the bid for connection, the bid for needs, distracting from the issue. Oh, let's just talk about something else. Oh, you'll be fine. It's going to be fine. Get over it. Here's a cookie. Here's some food. Make yourself feel better, right? That's underfunctioning. I don't want to deal with this, so we're going to distract ourselves. We're going to numb. Being emotionally absent, right? Just not being there as an emotional support for the child. Child's crying, just literally disassociating. And I experienced a lot of that for myself in both of these. Now, there's much more here, but these are just two general ones. I want to kind of get you a sense of this is what you can probably find a place where you've experienced and felt that in a family of origin. And it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with your family. It just means you're a family. All families have these things that we all need to work on. But what's important is understanding these relationships and navigating them now, and particularly as adults, as we have our own children or have our own relationships, because this is cumulative, y'all. This is not just, oh, this is a family relationship. It doesn't apply to my friends or my romantic. Absolutely not. There's a reason why I'm starting with family, because everything goes back to your family of origin. Just about every need that you have, desire, want, hope, that behavior where you are wanting that need met absolutely can be connected to your family of origin and how you experienced care, getting your needs met, emotional presence, all those things as a child. It's very, very powerful. And it always goes back to the family of origin. So that's why we're starting with family. Okay. So as adults, we carry these experiences of those family behaviors, and we take on those unhealthy behavioral dynamics that we had in our family of origin. And it usually shows up in response to difficult situations or pain. Very, very common is it will show up in your romantic relationships or parent-child the most. Those are your most intimate, closest, vulnerable relationships. So those old wounds that you experienced in connection early on in your life will be activated by those challenges, right? Okay. As adults, we carry them. Again, we have invisible baggage behind us. We don't leave that baggage at our family of origin's door. They come with us. Now, we unconsciously, for a lot of our lives, embody what was modeled for us. I'm in line, right? I totally lived in a way, behaved in a way that was very typical of my family of origin, which was we don't talk about feelings. You just pull up your bootstraps and get it done. But we're not going to talk about how you feel. One of my very most poignant memories for me was as a teenager, we had moved to a new town, and I was going to a new high school, and I was missing my friends from my hometown. And I remember I was crying in my bedroom, listening to music. And my mother opened the door, saw that I was crying, and was very clear, like, you need to stop crying. You have nothing to worry about, and shut the door. And for me, that was a poignant memory of, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way. And I was a teenager, so I had a lot of feelings anyway, with hormones and everything. But it was very poignant for me that I felt like, wow, I'm not allowed to feel what I'm feeling. And it was probably one of the first times I began to really kind of shut down that part of myself, because I felt like it wasn't okay. It wasn't okay. When really what I needed was my mom to sit down on the floor with me and say, wow, this is really hard. But she wasn't able to do that. So what can we do? What can we do about this? We're 20 minutes in. I got 9 minutes left. The goal is to finish this in 30 minutes. So, what can we do? So the biggest thing is simply becoming aware. Just listening to this is huge. Recognizing that your family of origin impacts your behavior today as an adult is huge. When we are more self-aware, our relationships will, in and of themselves, change. Why? Well, because relationships are like a dance. So when one person changes how they show up, it impacts the other person, right? So sometimes it can be a little scary and sometimes it can be great, but it depends on the relationship. But any change made by one person or the other impacts the dance. And the dance is a very delicate dance that requires a focus on what? Connection, right? Stable, safe, consistent connection. And it's the littlest things, y'all. So you can read a lot about that in the Gottman's The Love Prescription. They talk about that. So important. And they call it bids for connection. And it's so powerful. So when ouchy, difficult, hard situations happen, our brain and body respond immediately. Okay, so if you've listened to this in my other, if you listen to the podcasts for the challenge and previous times, you've heard me talk about this. But we can learn to regulate this by harnessing self-awareness. So this is really important. This iceberg image that you see, if you're on the podcast, is an image on the screen, and it has an iceberg with a line. And there's the surface of the iceberg and then the big, immense iceberg underneath, the rest of the iceberg. So above the line is what we see, and it's just the surface. But below the line, the water line, is what we don't see. And what's below the water line is what sunk the Titanic, not the top, right? So the bottom, underneath, what we don't see, what we're not conscious of about ourselves, is what? Which one is more dangerous? Well, of course, what we don't see. But which one is easier to deal with? Oh, what we see. So that's where we get focused on success or career or achievements, or focusing on, how our hobbies or what we like or what we enjoy. And those are all wonderful things, but that is not the depth of us. That when hard, challenging situations show up, your hobbies are going out the window unless they are there for truly emotional support, because you're aware enough that meets a creative need for you. But your job status, your career, your achievements, when hard things hit, you get a tough diagnosis, or your spouse or partner asks for a divorce or has an affair, or your kid has to go to rehab because they're addicted to pills, that career achievement award thing is going to be really not important to you. And you're going to be feeling lots of feelings that come from below the waterline. So below the waterline is where we continue to focus our self-awareness on coming to an understanding of ourselves. This is ours. This iceberg is ours. And everyone's is different. It's like a fingerprint. No one's is worse or better than anybody else's. We all have wounds, and we all carry them. And what's important is becoming conscious about them. So here's a couple of things I want to remind you about. So remember I said the body and the brain will react? Well, when challenging situations happen, particularly since we're focusing on family right now, right? You know, the first thing the brain's going to ask is, am I safe? Okay? Challenging situation arises for a child. A child in a family, if they don't feel safe, they are never going to move to grow to an emotionally safe place. Because am I safe is the first question their brain's going to ask. Okay? It's going to ask, hey, if I'm not safe, if there's not connection, right? Remember that safe, stable foundation of connection? Am I safe is the first question. And if the mind says, no, this isn't safe, then the mind will simply say, we're not going any further and we're going to shut down. So that's when we do fight, flight, or freeze. It's all about survival. It's all about the body, the heart rate. So am I safe? All of those initial feelings that we have come up when challenging situations arrive. When one of those wounds from our childhood is tapped, activated, we'll feel these very similar emotions. Why do we feel those emotions? Because once the am I safe question is answered, then you're into the am I loved? And that is your emotional memory. The limbic system is where memory and connection and moods and social bonding happens. So a lot of dialogue happens between this part of the brain and am I safe? So these two things are constantly working when we are experiencing challenging situations. So our emotional memory, that's why we can remember something from the past and we can actually feel the feelings because we're feeling it in our body, because our brain and body are responding to a perceived threat. What we know is now that we're aware of it, we can help ourselves feel safe, and we can also remind ourselves that we are loved simply by showing up for ourselves. The third question is, what can I learn from this? So this is the most creative part of the brain. It's the frontal lobe. This is where imagination, creativity, planning, logic, abstract thought, sensations, analysis, self-awareness. This is where amazing magical things can happen. But it cannot happen until the brain feels ready with, yes, we get a yes, I'm safe, and yes, I'm loved. That third question can't happen until you feel connection. So in family relationships, often we don't feel safe. We feel like maybe our siblings are going to make fun of us or reject us, or we feel like we have to be a certain way when we go home for Christmas or holidays. And that's why we feel that tension, right? And then your limbic system comes along and it reminds you of some memory, when you were a kid and how it felt. And so then you really don't want to go because you don't feel safe. And now you have all these bad memories and bad emotions. And then you wonder why, hey, I don't want to learn anything about my family. I'm going to go and survive and then come home. I've lived this, by the way. I've done this many, many times. Okay? There's another way. So these three questions are really important when you're thinking about, okay, relationships, how can I help myself be self-aware and show up for myself? Okay, I got 2 minutes left. Let's see if I can do it. So these are the life hacks, okay, for family. So families can feel like a bad movie, like a B movie. Everyone has a role to play, all right? So families have unique dynamics and patterns. Every family does. And every person in the family will generally have a role in which they play, right? So because these were our earliest years of development, this idea or concept that we need to be this kind of person when we show up in our families is totally normal and it's easily activated, right? You kind of can feel like you're stepping into a scene of a really bad movie, but it feels really familiar. And next thing you know, you're starting to behave in a way you haven't in a long time, or you're feeling like you have to behave a certain way, or you can't talk about certain subjects. And so you begin to feel not in a good way. Okay. So it can feel like that. And it's normal. So boundaries are lifesavers, okay? So families can often take on a singular mindset for a way of thinking about things. Beliefs are very typical. It can feel like it's my way or the highway. This happens again because we learned this early on in that an effort to feel safe and connected, we kind of pretended like we were good with it. We played along because our family was our security blanket. And so we adapted ourselves to follow the storyline that our caretakers were giving us. Doesn't mean they were bad, doesn't mean they were wrong. It just means that we just kind of learned behavior in order to stay safe, right? Remember, safety and loved. In order to feel safe and loved, we need to feel grounded in that foundation of connection, right? Even if we're wounded in connection, we're still going to be looking for that type of connection, even if it's hurtful. And that's what we're going to talk about next time. So as adults, this can make it really hard to disagree with or have a different opinion than parents or even siblings. So boundary work, boundaries, teaches us we are not responsible for the opinions of others. We can have our own and still show up for those we love. So that's healthy emotional intelligence as well as healthy boundaries, that I am me and you are you. And sometimes we can be very enmeshed with our family, particularly around beliefs. Religious beliefs or political beliefs is a big one. Okay. And then last, you are not responsible for how others feel in your family. Okay. So because of everything already discussed, families can have powerful dynamics surrounding things like guilt or grudges. So as adults, this can feel like suddenly feeling responsible for another family member's problem or situation, taking it on as if it is your problem. It's not your problem. It is theirs. And that can sound really mean. And that's not intended to be mean. It just understands that's their problem. I can try to support and show up for them in support, but I'm not there to fix them. And in fact, fixing them isn't going to help them, right? You can have empathy and offer help, but ultimately you are not responsible for how others feel. Their feelings are theirs. That also means that you cannot make someone feel anything, right? We are responsible for our feelings. Okay. Lastly, this is important. I'm 3 minutes over. Showing up with curiosity can be really helpful. Okay, so this is something I have been trying on a lot with my own family. So we have emotional memories of how our families function that are usually a mixture of true and false. So it's normal for the brain to make up stories, especially if there are blanks in the story that we don't recall well because maybe it was a tough situation or it was challenging or we didn't feel safe to really express how we felt. So the brain fills in the blanks, makes up a story. So we hold on to those stories, and those are the stories we carry with us into holidays and things like that, that this is how we are and this is how we function. As adults, it's kind of fun to understand that we've all evolved and grown, and we can discover that our family members are actually interesting people. We may not agree with them politically or even in a religious perspective, but we can have a wonderful experience really trying to get to know them as a person, as a human being, from a place of curiosity. You may realize you don't have as much in common, and that's okay. That's normal. It's okay for families to not agree, but still be able to show up for each other. So curiosity is the biggest life hack with regard to dealing with relationships in family situations and boundaries. Boundaries is really important. Okay, so that is all I have today. Hopefully this has been really helpful information, and you can take this and kind of put it in your back pocket. And I'm going to be posting all this to socials, and you'll be able to watch this on replay on all the places. On my Facebook page, specifically, you'll be able to see the replay as well as on my website. Okay. I hope this has been helpful information, and I look forward to seeing you guys in a couple weeks. If you have any questions, always feel free to reach out to me at heather@letsfeelgoodnow.com. I'm happy to be here and share the goods.